In Nigeria say Boko Haram militants have massacred more than 80 people.
Boko Haram is a terrorist organization.
The world talks about injustice. Everyday news headlines scream about oppression, war, and human rights violations. But what happens when an entire community is slaughtered and no one talks about it? 3,100. That's how many Christians were killed in Nigeria last year. And not to mention the 2,830 that were kidnapped and have never been found. Thousands of Christians are being killed, their homes burned, their churches reduced to ash every year. They are hunted, tortured, massacred, and yet it barely makes the news. In the last 25 years, the total number of Christians being murdered by Islamic extremist groups in just Nigeria is over 62,000. This is a silent genocide, and it is being ignored. Welcome to Hidden Truths, where we uncover the stories you were never told. If you believe this truth needs to be heard, take a second to like, comment, and subscribe. It's completely free, and it helps grow this channel, an independent small business fighting to bring real stories to light. Now, let's dive in. Since 2009, Boko Haram, a radical Islamist extremist group, has waged war against Christians in Nigeria. Their mission? To establish an Islamic caliphate by wiping out anyone who does not conform to their ideology. They've burned thousands of churches to the ground. They've slaughtered entire villages. They've kidnapped Christian women and forced them into marriages with militants.
Are you Christian?
Yes.
Now you're Muslim.
They've executed pastors simply for preaching the name of Jesus Christ. Boko Haram, officially known as JASDJ or the Nigerian Taliban, emerged in the early 2000s in northeastern Nigeria. Initially presenting itself as a religious movement opposing Western education influence, the group rapidly evolved into a violent insurgency by 2009. Their ultimate aim is to overthrow the Nigerian government and establish a regime based on their extreme interpretations of Islamic law. On the night of April 14, 2014, the town of Chibok in Borno State, Nigeria, was thrust into the global spotlight when Boko Haram militants abducted 276 female students from the government girls' secondary school. These girls, predominantly Christian and aged between 16 and 18, were preparing for their final exams in English. The school had been closed for 4 weeks due to escalating security concerns, but reopened specifically for these exams. Disguised in military uniforms, the insurgents deceived the students into believing they were soldiers, only to force them into trucks and transport them into the dense Sambisa forest. While 57 girls managed a daring escape by jumping from the vehicles, as of June 2023, over 90 remain unaccounted for. Reports indicate that some were compelled to convert to Islam, others were sold into slavery, and many have endured unimaginable hardships. This tragic event not only underscores the severe persecution faced by Christians in the region, but also highlights the broader issue of abductions and violence perpetrated by Boko Haram, with Amnesty International estimating that at least 2,000 women and girls have been abducted by the group since 2014. In another gruesome example, in 2020, ISIS released a video of a Christian aid worker being executed simply for their faith. ISIS did release this video showing the execution of these Christian aid workers, which highlighted the group's brutal persecution of those who do not share their extremist beliefs.
Big story, attacks on Christians escalating all around the world. ISIS now taking responsibility for killing 11 Christian men in Nigeria for what they say is retaliation for the death of its leader, Abubakar.
And many today believe ISIS has been wiped out, but slowly has been re-emerging in these very far remote regions, building back up. And the aid workers who were targeted for their faith were a chilling reminder of the ongoing persecution faced by religious minorities in certain regions. The video's release was part of the group's propaganda efforts, aimed at instilling fear and reinforcing their violent ideology. It's crucial to acknowledge these instances of persecution as part of the broader context of global religious intolerance and human rights abuses. A survivor of Boko Haram massacre shared a harrowing choice presented by the terrorists: renounce Christ or face execution. With unwavering faith, the individual chose to uphold their Christian beliefs, fully aware of their moral consequences. This courageous stand underscores the profound devotion and resilience of Nigerian Christians amidst unthinkable adversity. In just 2021, over 3,000 Christians were murdered in Nigeria, more than anywhere else in the world. Every single day, Christian men, women, and children are slaughtered. And yet, where are the global protests? Where are the politicians condemning this? Boko Haram wasn't always this powerful. They started in the early 2000s as a small movement, as we said before, just opposing Western education. But by 2009, they had transformed into this full-scale insurgency, launching terrorist attacks, suicide bombings, kidnappings all across Nigeria. And the Nigerian government, completely unprepared. Their tactics became more brutal by the year, burning entire villages, executing civilians, and carrying out mass abductions. But who is behind all this? Who is making it so that these Christians are being persecuted on an annual basis? It all points back to the one man, the leader of Boko Haram, Abubakar, who led the militant group since 2009. Under his leadership, Boko Haram waged a violent insurgency across Nigeria, specifically targeting Christian communities. The group's goal was to establish an Islamic state governed by their interpretation of Sharia law.
Secular education, support, and music. As a result of this today, many Muslims lost their Islam.
His infamous declaration of allegiance to ISIS further cemented his role as one of the most dangerous jihadist leaders in Africa. But in 2021, Shekau was killed when he detonated his suicide vest during a confrontation with another rival extremist group. However, despite his leadership ending right there, it was put into question who would lead Boko Haram, who would continue this plight of evil and carnage. It was then that Bakura Doro stepped up and became the leader. He continued the relentless war against Christians, moderate Muslims, and anyone who opposed their extremist vision. He believed that violence was not just a tool, but a religious obligation, one that justified massacres, bombings, and kidnappings. In addition to targeting Nigerian Christians, they've expanded their operations into neighboring countries like Cameroon, Chad, and Niger, where they continue to perpetrate cross-border violence. Boko Haram's child soldier camps train kidnapped children to become suicide bombers.
There have been 14 incidents that were reported of children being used as suicide attackers.
Women are forced into marriage or used as bargaining chips for ransom. They've looted towns and sold stolen ivory, rhino horns, and other wildlife products to fund their terrorism, trafficking these goods through black markets in Asia. Yes, you heard that right. Terrorism is being funded through illegal wildlife poaching, the same poaching that wealthy elites in China and the Middle East profit from. Disturbing revelations have emerged about financial networks bolstering terrorist activities. In a significant case, 6 individuals were convicted in the United Arab Emirates for transferring $782,000 from Dubai to Boko Haram in Nigeria.
6 Nigerians have been sanctioned by the United States for allegedly supporting Boko Haram.
These funds, funneled through clandestine channels, highlight the complexity interplay between corruption and terrorism. Alarmingly, leaked reports suggest that certain Nigerian politicians have diverted the money into groups linked to Boko Haram, further entrenching the cycle of violence.
I'd like to draw your attention to our leading story this hour about the federal government announcing that top politicians have links to Boko Haram.
Boko Haram isn't just an extremist group. They're a multi-million-dollar operation making money off corruption, trafficking, and global smuggling networks. Here's where things get even darker. Some Nigerian politicians are secretly funding the very terrorists they claim to fight. Nigerian government has repeatedly investigated allegations of politicians and officials funding Boko Haram, but no high-profile individuals have been publicly and definitively proven to be funding the group. However, reports from security agencies and intelligence sources suggest that some politicians, business figures, and government officials may have indirectly supported Boko Haram through ransom payments, corrupt practices, or failure to act against financiers. And that's just the tip of the iceberg. Thanks to independent media sources such as Ali Tabrizi, in this case, we know about the most horrific incident that took place just this year, on February 13th, 2025 at 4 a.m. in the small village of Maiba in the Lubero territory of the Democratic Republic of Congo. An Islamic militant group tracked and targeted an innocent Christian community. The attackers, the allied ADF, a militant group linked to ISIS. According to sources on the ADF, they arrived and raided the homes with attackers ordering the residents to get out, and don't make any noise. 20 Christian men and women were taken captive right away before they seized another 50, and then they had 70 total hostages. And from there, they transported them to where? A Protestant church in Kazanga. The place of worship and praising Jesus Christ became an execution hall. It was there where they are mercilessly beheaded, each of this ADF clearly sending a message that Christianity is not allowed. The Allied Democratic Forces ADF is a militant group operating primarily in the Democratic Republic of Congo and Uganda. The ADF has a history of targeting Christian communities, particularly through raids on villages and church attacks. The ADF has been linked to ISIS and shares similar ideologies, including a desire to enforce strict interpretations of Islam. Their attacks have been marked by brutal killings of Christians, often in the form of mass execution. In recent years, the ADF has carried out a series of massacres in the DRC, with hundreds of civilians, mainly Christians, killed. Like Boko Haram, the ADF operates in remote areas, using the dense forests of the DRC as cover. Their attacks are often well coordinated and highly violent, including bombings, ambushes, and machete killings. Ilya Djadi, a senior analyst on religious persecution in Africa.
My name is Ilya Djadi. I'm a senior analyst for freedom of religion and belief.
Put it bluntly, this was not just an act of terror. It was a targeted massacre of Christians, and it will not stop here. And yet, how much do we hear about this on the news? Despite the severity and frequency of these attacks, global media coverage remains conspicuously sparse, while various humanitarian crises receive widespread attention. The systematic persecution of Christians in Nigeria and neighboring regions often go unreported. A pastor who lost his entire congregation in a church attack said, "They can burn our churches, but they will never burn Jesus out of our hearts." A survivor of another Boko Haram said, "They told me to deny Christ or die. I chose Christ." Even as their homes are destroyed, they sing worship songs. Even as they are dragged to their executions, they pray. Their faith isn't shaken, it is strengthened. A true test of faith. By bringing these hidden truths to light, we can challenge the global community to confront this injustice and work towards meaningful change. The persecutions of Christians in Nigeria and other parts of Africa is a brutal and pressing issue that most people have no idea even exists. It's a crisis that's been ongoing for years, yet continues to fly under the radar for many. But here's the thing, this isn't just a problem in one country. It's part of a larger global pattern of religious violence that's happening right now. And it's something we can't afford to ignore. But the reality is far worse than just physical violence. Christian women are being kidnapped and subjugated to sexual violence. Children are being abducted, forced to become soldiers, or worse, forced to convert to Islam and become bombers. Entire villages are burned to the ground, Christian homes destroyed, and in the chaos, thousands of families are displaced. Their lives turned upside down as they flee to crowded refugee camps, some even seeking shelter in neighboring country. As we focus on Nigeria, we cannot forget the persecution of Christians is not isolated to one country. From the Middle East to China to North Korea, these Christians are attacked everywhere. And it's up to us, each and every one of us, to make sure their stories are heard, their suffering is acknowledged, and their fight for survival is supported. So what can you do? You can speak up, share this video, tell others about what's happening in Nigeria, and support organizations that are working tirelessly to make a difference. By standing together, we can shine a light on this darkness, and just maybe we can be part of ending it. So what do you think? Why does the world ignore Christian persecution? Let me know in the comments. If this video moved you, take a second to like, comment, and subscribe to Hidden Truths. It's free and it helps grow this independent small business so we can continue exposing stories the world ignores.